Geeks! A woman tied herself to the tennis net at the French Open in the middle of a match to protest climate change. And between her and the Mona Lisa cake dude from last week, I figured we all needed a quick how-to guide on doing a successful protest. Step 1, organize people. A lot of people. Step 2, gather somewhere relevant. Step 3, have clear demands. Step 4, don't do dumb. Step 5, get coverage of it. And if no one covers it, then take your top off. But don't get in the way of Nadal's win. We got a lot this week. We'll start with Boris Johnson's no confidence vote, the latest in Ukraine and the global hunger crisis, Biden going to Saudi Arabia, a pair of corrupt brothers who were arrested in Dubai, and a young woman who bravely came out at her graduation. Before we start though, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. Prime Minister Boris Johnson faced a no confidence vote this week, and he survived, but he definitely came out weaker. What led to this vote was a series of stories about boozy parties held at his residence during the pandemic lockdown. So a lot of British citizens were outraged since they had to follow pandemic rules while Boris and his staff were basically playing beer pong. This saga has been building up since last year, to the point now where members of Boris's own party want him out. In fact, they're the ones who called for the no confidence vote. The result was 211 to 148. They needed 180 votes to push him out of office, so that means they were only 32 votes away from ending Boris's career. Good math, right? Thing is, I don't really believe the pandemic parties are the only thing that got us here. In the 3 years since he's been in office, he's been accused of being all talk and no action. His own peers have accused him of not pursuing long-term sustainable solutions to British economic issues, or having a strong vision for the UK economy now that it left the EU. And let's be honest, he can kind of be a buffoon. That's why he's my favorite person to impersonate. So even though Boris survived this, it's not going to be easy to lead when so many people have lost their faith in him. During the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which was kind of like one big 4-day party celebrating her 70 years as the longest reigning queen, Boris's arrival to the party was even more awkward than Harry and Meghan's. People actually booed him. The reason I cover Boris so often is because when I was in government, of all our international partners, the UK was often the most important. Don't tell the French I said that. So whomever's in office in London matters, because we usually like to do most of our faux pas with them. After Boris survived this vote, he told his cabinet that we can now get on with talking about the issues I think the people in this country want to talk about, like whether or not to reduce taxes, and whether Ms. Markle was really the one to corrupt Prince Harry, or if he's always just been a bugger. British politics can certainly be volatile, but for now, it looks like Boris is keeping calm and carrying on. So are we close to diplomatic negotiations in Ukraine? French President Macron is the only Western leader left still talking to Putin. And whatever came out of the last conversation, Macron said it's important to not humiliate Russia over the invasion so that we can give Russia an out from its, quote, fundamental error. Luckily, Ukraine's foreign minister clapped back by saying that it's more important to focus on how to put Russia in its place as it humiliates itself. I'm on Team Ukraine here, but it's not a terrible idea to have some kind of channel to push Putin into negotiations, even if it's Macron trying to make himself feel important. And that's because a protracted war is not in Ukraine's interest. President Zelensky himself said this week that a stalemate is not an option. And he's right for 2 major reasons. First, if you have a protracted war, you're talking about an adversary that doesn't play by the same rules, and so Russia will only pursue more atrocities and potentially genocide. And that results in more Ukrainians being terrorized and tortured, and it also leads to a generally lawless situation that could create insurgents and then chaos, kind of like in Syria. The second reason is that the world is giving an unprecedented amount of military aid to Ukraine right now. But that high level of aid can't go on forever. Now, diplomats at the UN gave another reason, which is the fact that the Ukraine war is exacerbating the world's hunger crisis because Russia has blocked shipments of grain by blocking Ukraine's ports. In fact, when Russia was accused of using food supplies as a weapon, the Russian ambassador walked out of the Security Council meeting. This is a classic UN move, by the way. It's like the geeky UN way of giving the finger. When I worked at the UN, we were trained on how to walk out with a swagger and give especially scary looks. Ukraine is the 5th largest exporter of wheat, 4th largest exporter of corn, and top exporter of sunflower oil and meal. So things like that are used for bread, pasta, and packaged goods. Last year, Ukraine accounted for 10% of global wheat exports. So imagine now the majority of those wheat exports have come to a halt. The UN estimates that 20 million tons of harvested grain are stuck in Ukraine. So why is this a big deal? Countries all over the world import wheat from Ukraine, but some of them depend on it almost entirely. And when you have this perfect storm of the pandemic, climate change, and now the Ukraine war, supply is way down and prices have skyrocketed. And that's now worsening what was an already really bad global hunger crisis, where 49 million people are starving and 323 million people are nearing starvation. On top of it, Russia's trying to profit off of some of the stolen grain and has been accused of selling it to Syria and Turkey. Russia says it could potentially end the blockade of shipments if sanctions were lifted, which is yet another reminder of just how criminal the Russian government is. To terrorize Ukrainians, profit off their goods, and to force the hungry to starve because of the world's support for Ukraine. That's Putin's regime. If you can't keep track whether or not Biden is traveling to Saudi Arabia, it's not your fault. Since March, there have been conflicting news reports about an alleged trip to the Middle East. Here's what we know. Back in March, rumors started swirling about Biden potentially traveling to Saudi Arabia to talk about oil production while he was trying to push Russian oil off the market. The White House denied it at the time, and since then, it feels like no one can make up their mind about this trip. It looks like Biden might actually go there now in July to talk about a range of issues, including a possible normalization deal with Israel, Saudi oil, and then issues like Iran threats and efforts to isolate Russia. But it's a tad awkward because last year, the White House said that Biden would not meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman because he's literally a murderer. He's the one who, according to the CIA, ordered the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. So the White House said that human rights mattered and that Biden would never meet with him, but rather his dad, King Salman, instead. Except if Biden goes now, not only is Mohammed Baby Salman the person he might meet with, but he could also end up fighting for his affection. So Saudi dissidents are pissed, and they say that this kind of outreach undermines their fight for human rights. I asked you all if you thought Biden should cancel this trip, and it was an even split down the middle. Here's the thing. FOPO is complicated. It often includes dealing with unsavory characters because of mutual interests. And when it comes to getting oil prices down, there are a series of not good options at the moment. The US produces 20% of the total world share, which sounds pretty good, except that it's so expensive to actually get the oil out of the ground here that it's cheaper for us to import oil from abroad. Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran together, clearly a winning team there, possess half of the world's 1.55 trillion barrels of oil. So either we let thugs like Saudi and Venezuelan leaders make more money by selling more oil, or we increase our own production and our costs here. Ultimately, I think we should work to figure out the oil issue without allowing dictators and murderers to call the shots. But that doesn't mean I don't think a trip to Saudi Arabia may not be worth it. Biden just has to remember that he's the president of the United States, and he should extract more from Saudi Arabia than we're willing to give. So get some political prisoners released, do a peace deal, but stick to your guns and skip a meeting with the baby and insist on only meeting with the king. Looky, who's a little crooky? A pair of brothers named Atul and Rajesh Gupta were arrested in Dubai this week because of their corrupt activities in South Africa. It sounds like a very rags to riches story. The sons of a local shopkeeper in India who went to South Africa and became one of the richest families there. Except that's not the story. The Gupta brothers worked in building, and they started doing business with the president at the time, President Zuma. That guy was an asshole who stole $32 billion in state assets. So with their government connections, these brothers did some shady things, like buying a coal mine and setting up a media business to support the president. They were given tens of billions of dollars to improve the lives of poor black South Africans, but instead, they pocketed the money that was supposed to go for basic services like supporting schools. So when they found themselves at the center of a political corruption scandal, they fled to Dubai to avoid being arrested in South Africa. The US Treasury Department sanctioned these bros 3 years ago for widespread corruption and bribery and for misappropriating state assets. Now, 4 years later, they were arrested in Dubai. Which, by the way, is a surprise, since we don't usually think of the UAE as the beacon in fighting global corruption. We are arresting you for corruption. Give me your watch and I'll give you some motor. I'm glad these guys will finally be held accountable, but for stealing from the South African people, the Gupta bros are on my list this week. Jillian Orr just graduated from Brigham Young University, and she came out by flashing a pride flag she had sewn on the inside of her graduation gown. And it sounds nice because she came out and she celebrated her identity and she shared it with the world. Except that Jillian wanted to come out sooner but felt like she couldn't because she could have been turned in by one of her classmates or professors because of Brigham Young's ban on same-sex romantic behavior. And it turns out it's not the first time a student there waited until graduation to come out. Now you might think this sounds illegal, which is what I thought. The US Department of Education actually opened a civil rights investigation there last year to see if the university was violating Title IX, which protects against discrimination on the basis of sex in schools. But the university said that it's exempt from Title IX due to religious conflicts, and the government dismissed the complaint. Jillian explained that she wasn't trying to give Brigham Young the middle finger. She just felt like she was being forced to choose between her spirituality and sexuality. I think she was doing a really brave thing, and by fighting for her true identity and passion, she'll likely end up changing things for the better for everyone else. Thanks, geeks! I know a lot of you are planning some summer travel, so I have an important PSA for you. If you travel to any ancient sites or archaeological digs, can you please do me a favor and don't for a second think about picking up even a rock and taking it with you. This British geologist just got sentenced to 15 years in an Iraqi jail for taking some pieces of pottery he found while at an archaeological site. And he claims he didn't know you can do that, which may or may not be true, but I just figured I'd tell you that the American embassy isn't going to be able to save your ass if you do that. So don't even think about it. Before you go, don't forget to please like this video, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you have something you want me to talk about, let me know over social media and I will give you a shout out. Stay fabulous, geeks.